My name is Jack, and I've been a long-haul truck driver for almost a decade. I've seen a lot of strange things on the road, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened in the middle of nowhere on one fateful night. It was a clear autumn evening, and I was driving through a desolate stretch of a country road in Montana. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving a purple-black sky strewn with stars. My truck rumbled along the road, the growl of the engine filling the silence. I had been on the road for hours, fueled by coffee and classic rock blaring from the radio. Just as I was about to change the station, something caught my eye, a flickering light in the distance. As I drew closer, I realized it was a fire, bright and warm against the cold night. Curious, I slowed down, thinking it might be an accident or perhaps a roadside campfire. I pulled my truck to the side of the road and stepped out. The cool air hit me like a splash of cold water. A group of 5 people were standing around the fire, illuminated by the orange flames that gently swayed to music coming from a small Bluetooth speaker. They seemed to be having a good time, laughing and dancing, their faces glowing in the firelight. As I approached, I noticed their clothing was outdated, as if they had stepped straight out of the 1970s. The women wore flowing dresses, while the men sported bell-bottoms and brightly colored shirts. It was a strange sight, but I chalked it up to a group of partygoers enjoying the night. "Hey," I called out as I got closer, "what are you all doing out here?" They turned to me, and my heart sank. Their eyes had a strange, hollow quality, as if they weren't quite there, but they smiled broadly. Their expressions were unsettling, but inviting. "Come over," one of the women beckoned, her voice sounding like the music. "Join us, the night is young." I hesitated, sensing that something was wrong. "I'm just passing through. I thought there might be a problem or something. Are you all okay?" "We're just having a little party," said a tall man with wild hair, swaying as if caught in a rhythm only he could hear. "Why don't you dance with us?" I laughed nervously, looking around at the others. They all seemed lost in their own world, moving with a strange abandon to the music. But that hollow look in their eyes was unnerving, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Really, I should go," I said, taking a step back. "I have a delivery to make." "Don't be so quick to leave," another woman interjected, her smile widening. "You'll miss all the fun. Come and dance. We can make this a night to remember." I shook my head, trying to ward off the growing unease in my stomach. "Thanks, but I really can't." But before I could finish speaking, the music shifted to a slow, haunting melody that sent a shiver down my spine. The fire crackled, and the flames danced wildly, casting eerie shadows against the trees. My instinct screamed at me to get back to my truck, to leave this strange gathering behind. "Okay, I really must go," I said, turning back toward my truck. As I reached my truck, I heard the voices behind me soften, but the invitation was still there, echoing in the night. "Stay with us. Don't go." I scrambled into the cab, my heart pounding. I slammed the door shut and locked it while fumbling with the keys to start the engine. The rumble of the truck engine felt comforting in the strange atmosphere outside. But just as I was about to pull away, I noticed movement in my side mirror. One of the figures, a woman in a flowing dress, had moved closer, her face now pressed against the glass. Her features were contorted into an expression of raw hunger and desperation. The air grew heavy, and a sense of dread enveloped me. "Let's dance, Jack," she mouthed, but no sound came out. I could feel my heart racing as I put the truck in gear, my foot hovering over the accelerator. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as I was about to floor the gas, a loud thud echoed through the truck, making me jump. My eyes shot to the front windshield. One of the men was pounding on the hood, his face twisted in an expression of madness, eyes wide and unblinking. "Don't go," he screamed, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. "We just want to dance." I laughed nervously, looking around at the others. They all seemed lost in their own world, moving with a strange abandon to the music. But that hollow look in their eyes was unnerving, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Really, I should go, I said, taking a step back. I have a delivery to make. Don't be so quick to leave, another woman interjected, her smile widening. You'll miss all the fun. Come and dance. We can make this a night to remember. I shook my head, trying to ward off the growing unease in my stomach. Thanks, but I really can't. But before I could finish speaking, the music shifted to a slow, haunting melody that sent a shiver down my spine. The fire crackled and the flames danced wildly, casting eerie shadows against the trees. My instinct screamed at me to get back to my truck, to leave this strange gathering behind. Okay, I really must go, I said, turning back toward my truck. As I reached my truck, I heard the voices behind me soften, but the invitation was still there, echoing in the night. Stay with us. Don't go. I scrambled into the cab, my heart pounding. I slammed the door shut and locked it while fumbling with the keys to start the engine. The rumble of the truck engine felt comforting in the strange atmosphere outside. But just as I was about to pull away, I noticed movement in my side mirror. One of the figures, a woman in a flowing dress, had moved closer, her face now pressed against the glass. Her features were contorted into an expression of raw hunger and desperation. The air grew heavy, and a sense of dread enveloped me. "Let's dance, Jack," she mouthed, but no sound came out. I could feel my heart racing as I put the truck in gear, my foot hovering over the accelerator. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as I was about to floor the gas, a loud thud echoed through the truck, making me jump. My eyes shot to the front windshield. One of the men was pounding on the hood, his face twisted in an expression of madness, eyes wide and unblinking. "Don't go," he screamed, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. "We just want to dance." Panic surged through me, and I slammed the truck into reverse, pulling away from the firelight and back onto the road. But the shadows seemed to cling to me. The figures were dancing at the roadside, their laughter echoing in the darkness. I could barely breathe, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, the truck lurched, as if something had grabbed the back, pulling me back. I spun the steering wheel, fighting to maintain control, but the road ahead was a blur. I caught a glimpse of the woman again, her ghostly form floating just outside my window, beckoning me back. "Jack, come back, we need you." The engine sputtered, and I felt a weight pressing down on the cab, making it hard to steer. The music from before was playing in my head, a haunting melody that was drawing me into a trance-like state, but I shook my head violently to focus. I finally found a straight stretch and floored the accelerator. The engine roared to life as I raced desperately forward, trying to escape. But just as I thought I'd left them behind, I felt a sharp jolt and the truck shuddered violently. I glanced in the rearview mirror and my blood ran cold. The figures were all there now, swirling around my truck, dancing in a circle, as if mocking my attempts to flee. "Come back, Jack," they called in unison, their voices blending into an eerie harmony. "Join us." I slammed on the brakes as the truck shot forward, coming to an abrupt stop. I was sweating, my heart pounding, and I felt utterly trapped. There was no way out. The road was empty, and the shadows were closing in around me, blocking out the moonlight. Suddenly, I heard a deafening bang on the passenger side. I spun around, and to my horror, I saw the tall man had climbed onto the hood, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes wild and filled with frantic energy. "You can't escape us," he screamed, and I could see his mouth contort into a wide grin that sent a shiver down my spine. I fumbled for my phone, my hand shaking as I tried to call for help. But there was no reception out here, no signal in the dead silence of the night. The whispers returned, louder now, enveloping me like a thick fog. "Join us, dance with us." I could feel the heat of the fire behind me, its glow illuminating the shadows, and I fought against the paralysis that was creeping over me. I slammed the truck into reverse, determined to break free,
But as I did, the headlights illuminated a new figure standing directly in front of me, another person blocking the road, looking at me with an eerie smile. An old beat-up pickup truck was sitting there, abandoned, its tires flat and covered in rust. I barely had time to register what I was seeing when the figures suddenly surged toward me, their movements synchronized like a mob dance. I threw the truck into drive, narrowly swerving around the figures as I sped past the abandoned truck. The laughter echoed in my ears, mixing with the old music that had started playing out of nowhere. "Jack, you can't escape the dance." The road twisted and turned, but I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, desperate to put as much distance as possible between myself and the shadows. I dared not look back, but I could feel their presence lingering just outside my field of vision, a weight in the air that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the truck lurched again, and I felt something slam against the back. Panic rose inside me, and my heart sank. The figures had formed a line now, their arms outstretched as if reaching for me. I veered off the road, hoping to escape into the woods, but the truck sputtered and choked on the uneven ground. I slammed on the brakes, and the engine died, leaving me in total darkness, surrounded by the whispering trees. I was alone. Or so I thought. The figures surrounded my truck, their faces illuminated by the dying glow of the headlights. They were smiling, their expressions turning into something more sinister and yet alluring. "Come to us, Jack," they called, their voices harmonizing in a haunting melody. Fear cramped in my stomach as I tried to regain control. I ripped the door open and stumbled out into the night. The moment my feet hit the ground, the laughter erupted all around me, echoing through the trees. "Come dance with us." With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and ran into the woods, branches scratching my face and arms. The laughter followed me, mocking me as I plunged deeper into the darkness. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to get away from them, but the whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind, pulling me back. "Come to us, Jack. Dance." I stumbled and fell to the ground as exhaustion overtook me. I could hear them coming closer, their footsteps echoing in the night, a symphony of shadows closing in. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went silent. I lay there, my heart pounding, straining to hear anything in the stillness. Slowly, I pushed myself up and looked around. The woods were quiet, as if the night had swallowed the laughter whole. But then, I felt a presence behind me. I turned around, and there she was, the woman in the flowing dress, her face illuminated by an ethereal glow. "Come to us, Jack," she whispered, her voice a ghostly melody. "You'll never be alone again." I felt the pull, the desire to step closer, to embrace the darkness and the company it offered in the form of a dance. But deep down, I fought against it, knowing that joining them would mean losing myself forever. With a final burst of strength, I turned and ran back towards the road, fighting my way through the undergrowth, ignoring the pain in my legs. The distant glow of my truck beckoned me like a lighthouse in a storm. I burst through the trees, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The truck stood eerily still, the shadows lingering around it. But I didn't hesitate. I jumped inside, slamming the door shut. With shaking hands, I turned the ignition. The engine sputtered and roared to life. The shadows were dancing outside the windows, and I could hear their laughter rising in a crescendo. But I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, spinning the tires in the dirt, and raced down the road. The figures disappeared into the darkness behind me, their voices fading into a mere echo. I didn't stop until the lights of a distant town broke through the night, the warmth of civilization washing over me. I pulled into a gas station, my heart racing, and rushed inside, gasping for air. The clerk behind the counter looked at me with concern. "You okay, man?" I glanced back at the door, half expecting to see the figures standing there, waiting for my return. But the road was empty, and the night was silent. "Just get me a coffee," I stammered, trying to shake off the terror that gripped me. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I felt the weight of what had happened settle in. Those shadows, those figures, they weren't just figments of my imagination. They were real, and they were dancing out there, waiting for their next guest to join their eternal celebration. I shuddered at the thought, knowing that every truck driver who passed that desolate stretch of highway would one day hear their ghostly invitation. Come, dance with us.
There is a disquieting emptiness in the desert at night. The stars hang like pinpricks in a vast black nothingness, and even the air feels heavy, filled with something ancient and watchful. I've been a long-haul trucker for over 10 years and had grown used to the strange and eerie atmosphere of the nighttime roads, but one night, driving a remote stretch in the Nevada desert, something happened that still makes me doubt what I experienced. It was a Tuesday night in October, and I was hauling freight down Route 50, an isolated road known as the loneliest highway in America. Nothing but scrub brush and sand on either side for miles. No lights except for the dim glow of my truck's headlights and the cold sheen of the moon above. The only other vehicles I had seen all night were a couple of RVs, probably tourists who had no idea what they were getting into. Route 50 is a graveyard for the unwary. Just past 1 a.m., my GPS cut out. Not unusual, I thought. The desert often messes with signals. But then the CB radio went dead too. It crackled, hissed, and then faded into static. I thumped it a couple of times, but nothing came through. Great, I muttered. Tonight of all nights to give up. I was used to handling things alone, but the sudden silence was unnerving. I tried to shake off the discomfort when, in the glow of my high beams, I saw something up ahead. At first, it looked like a boulder or an old abandoned truck, but as I got closer, I realized it was a wreck. A tractor-trailer lying on its side, right in the middle of the road. I slowed down cautiously. There were no lights, no warning flares, nothing. Just the massive shadow of a toppled truck, half in the dirt, half on the asphalt. Its trailer was crumpled like a piece of paper, the metal twisted and dark. I rolled to a stop about 50 feet away, keeping my high beams fixed on the wreck. It was dead silent, no engine noise, no sign of movement, no smoke. I'd heard stories of abandoned trucks out here, mostly stolen or used for other shady purposes, then dumped and forgotten. Out of habit, I reached for my CB radio, even though I knew it was dead. Anybody copy? Got a wreck on Route 50, mile marker. I trailed off, searching for a mile marker, but there wasn't one in sight. In fact, nothing around me looked familiar. I'd driven this road for years, but right now, well, something felt off. I had barely finished speaking when a figure stepped into my headlights. A man, tall and thin, wearing a long coat and a trucker's cap. His face was in shadow, but I could see his hands, pale and rough, with what looked like dried blood smeared across his knuckles. He raised his hand and waved slowly at me. My gut told me to keep driving. I don't normally pick up hitchhikers, especially not in the middle of the night, especially not out here. But something about his slow, almost mechanical wave made me feel like I had no choice, like he was somehow drawing me in against my better judgment. I rolled down the window. "Need some help?" I called out, trying to keep my tone casual even as my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The man nodded slowly, his face still in shadow. "Truck's broken down," he said in a low, toneless voice. I glanced at the wreck, then back at him. "Looks like more than just a breakdown," I said. "Where's your load, and any other passengers?" His head tilted slightly, as if he didn't quite understand the question. "It's just me," he mumbled, "and my truck." The way he said it, with a strange emphasis on my truck, sent a shiver down my spine. "Well," I said slowly, "I can give you a ride to the next town, but I have to warn you, it's a couple of hours away." I half hoped he would say no, but he just nodded again, as if that was exactly what he expected. The man climbed into the passenger side of my cab, moving with stiff, almost unnatural motions.
Up close, I could see his face better. His skin was pale and sunken, his eyes dark and empty, as if they weren't even looking at me, but right through me. He settled in, didn't buckle up, just stared straight ahead. The silence between us was oppressive, and I could feel my pulse throbbing in my ears. A few miles into the drive, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You know this road?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep things light. "Been driving it for years. You could say I know it like the back of my hand." He didn't answer, just kept staring straight ahead with the same blank expression.
A few minutes passed, then he asked, "Do you know who drives this road?" The question was strange, unnerving. I forced a laugh. "Well, mostly truckers, people passing through." He shook his head slowly. "No, the ones who are here when no one else is." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You mean the night drivers?" He turned to me, and his eyes seemed to darken, filled with something that looked almost like fear, or maybe recognition. "No, not them. The ones who don't leave." The temperature in the cab seemed to drop, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I forced myself to focus on the road, refusing to look at him, but I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and unwavering. "Have you ever heard of the ghost truck in the cut?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "No, can't say I have." "It's an old truck, rusty and beat up. They say it's been driving these roads longer than anyone can remember," he continued, his voice low and steady. "No one knows who drives it. No one's ever seen the driver. But if you're out here long enough, you'll see the truck." A shiver ran down my spine. I'd heard plenty of ghost stories from fellow drivers, but this one felt different, somehow more personal. "What happens when you see it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stared out the window, his face expressionless. Finally, he mumbled, "When you see it, it means it's seen you." I glanced into my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a pair of headlights in the distance, but there was only darkness behind us. A long silence followed, stretching out like the endless road ahead. Then, without warning, the man spoke again. "He found me," he said, his voice barely audible. "I was driving one night, just like this. My truck broke down, and then he came. The ghost truck. He's been following me ever since." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "They say he's after you." He nodded slowly, his face pale and sunken. "He doesn't stop. He just follows, waits." A sudden flash of light in my side mirror caught my attention, and I looked back. There, far in the distance, a pair of dim headlights appeared, flickering like dying embers. I looked at the man. He was staring straight ahead, his face tense. "He's coming," he whispered, barely moving his lips. I gripped the steering wheel tight, my heart racing. I didn't know what to believe, but something in the man's voice, the way he seemed so sure, made me feel like I was in real danger. The lights grew brighter, and I could make out a shape in the darkness, a rusty old truck, its paint peeling and faded. "Don't stop," the man said, his voice trembling. "Whatever you do, don't stop." I nodded, my foot pressing harder on the gas pedal as the old truck drew closer. It made no sound, no engine hum, no drone of tires on asphalt, just the silent, relentless approach of something old and malevolent. We drove on, the phantom truck following us like a shadow, and while I can't say for sure what it was, one thing is certain. I never saw that passenger again after he vanished at the next stop, leaving behind nothing but a chill in the air and the memory of those empty, tormented eyes. It was supposed to be a simple job. I'd been on the road for hours, hauling goods across state lines, and this warehouse on the outskirts of town was my last stop before heading home. My dispatcher pitched it as a quick drop-off, just a couple of pallets to unload, and I'd be on my way. The pay was good, and it didn't seem like too much trouble. But when I arrived, it was nearly midnight, and something about the place didn't feel right. The warehouse stood at the edge of an industrial park, a part of town where everything looked half abandoned. The surrounding buildings were dilapidated and covered in graffiti, windows broken, and doors hanging loose. The only source of light was a flickering street lamp that cast long, distorted shadows across the cracked asphalt. The silence was unnerving, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're somewhere you don't belong. I parked my truck, shut off the engine, and stepped out. A chill hung in the air, and an uncomfortable prickle crawled up my spine as I surveyed the scene. Usually, warehouses like this would have someone on duty, even during the night shift, but there wasn't a soul in sight. No lights, no sounds, no night watchman or worker to greet me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the metal siding of the building. The resulting silence seemed to swallow my words whole. Shaking off the unease, I walked to the back of the truck to start unloading. I figured I could get this done quickly and be back on the road in no time. I had unloaded 2 pallets and was just setting them down near the door when I heard something. A faint, metallic clinking coming from somewhere inside the warehouse. I straightened up and listened. It was weak, almost inaudible, but enough to set me on edge. The sound repeated, like metal tapping against metal, coming from the depths of the building. Probably just an old pipe or something, I muttered to myself, though I wasn't entirely convinced. I decided to ignore it and get back to work. I returned to the truck, grabbed the next pallet, and set it down with the others. But as I lowered the lift gate and turned back, I noticed something odd. The first 2 pallets were not where I had left them. They had been moved, only a few feet, closer to the loading dock door. I frowned, scanning the darkness around me. I was sure I hadn't misplaced them. Was someone playing a trick on me? But who would be out here at this hour? I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the bad feeling. Maybe I was tired, or the ground was uneven. But as I went back for the 4th pallet, my mind kept returning to the ominous silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind. I stacked the last pallet, straightened up, and took a few steps back. But as I turned around, I heard it again. The unmistakable clatter of metal echoing through the hall, closer this time, sending a chill down my spine. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence. I waited, listening, hoping to hear footsteps or a sign of another person, but there was nothing. After a moment, I shook my head, trying to dismiss the disturbing feeling. Maybe someone's playing a trick on me, or maybe it's just my nerves, I reasoned. Just as I was about to turn back to my truck, I heard it. A slow, dragging sound, metal being pulled across concrete. I froze, my heart starting to pound as I strained my ears to pinpoint the sound's direction. It was coming from somewhere deeper inside the warehouse. Instinctively, I took a few steps back, glancing over my shoulder at the door. But just as I was about to make a run for it, I saw a shadow at the end of the aisle, between the shelves. It was faint, barely more than a blur, but it was there, something moving in the darkness. My breath hitched as I squinted, trying to make out what it was. The shadow shifted slowly, emerging from the dark corners of the warehouse. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, bony limbs that bent at unnatural angles. It wore what looked like old, tattered coveralls, hanging loosely on its thin frame. I felt paralyzed, caught between the urge to run and the need to understand what I was seeing. But then it moved, taking a step forward, dragging something heavy across the floor. A faint glint caught my eye, and to my horror, I realized it was a rusty chain, thick and heavy, with a hook on the end. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure as it approached. Its head tilted slowly to the side, and even from my vantage point, I could see its face, or rather, the lack of one. Where eyes should have been were only hollow, sunken sockets, and its mouth was open in a silent scream, an abyss that seemed to swallow the light around it.
I stumbled backward, my boots scraping on the concrete as I finally broke free from my stupor. I turned and ran for the door, not daring to look back. As I reached the exit, I grabbed the handle and pulled, but it didn't budge. I pulled harder, desperation rising in me, but the door was locked. I was trapped. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, hoping, praying that someone would hear me. The dragging sound grew louder behind me, the chain drawing closer, each clink a death knell in the silence. I forced myself to turn around, my heart in my throat. The figure was still there, now standing motionless in the middle of the aisle. It was watching me, or at least I thought it was. Those hollow eye sockets seemed to stare right through me, pinning me to the spot. The chain hung slack from its hand, the hook swinging slightly as it tilted its head to the side. What do you want?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer, but instead raised a bony hand, pointing a skeletal finger in my direction. My blood ran cold as it took a step forward, the chain dragging again. I couldn't take it anymore. Adrenaline took over, and I spun around and ran, bolting through the narrow aisles between the shelves, hoping to find another exit. My boots echoed through the empty warehouse, the sound mixing with the relentless scrape of the chain behind me. I reached a dead end and spun around, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. My mind raced, frantically searching for a way out. I couldn't go back, not with that thing pursuing me. My eyes darted around, and I spotted a door leading to a stairwell on the far side of the room. Without hesitation, I charged toward it, my footsteps thundering across the floor. I grabbed the handle and shoved the door open, stumbling into the stairwell. The door slammed shut behind me, and I leaned against it, gasping. But the reprieve was short-lived. I could still hear the faint dragging of the chain, echoing from the other side of the door. I scrambled up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, my heart racing as I climbed higher and higher. When I reached the top floor, I found myself in another vast, empty room, lined with rows of forgotten crates and boxes. The windows were grimy, covered in years of dust and grime, but I could make out the outlines of the parking lot outside. I raced to one of the windows and peered out, searching for a way to escape. There was no fire escape, no easy way out. I was trapped. A creak sounded from the stairwell, and I felt my blood run cold. It was coming, slowly, methodically, climbing the stairs, each step bringing it closer. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I had to hide, find a place where it couldn't find me. I spotted an old storage locker in the corner of the room and rushed towards it, pulling the door open and squeezing inside. I pulled the door shut, plunging into darkness, my breath coming in ragged gasps, fighting to stay quiet as I listened for the figure's approach. The dragging sound grew louder, echoing through the room as it reached the top of the stairs. I could hear it moving slowly, methodically searching the room, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, but I held my breath, forcing myself to stay hidden. The footsteps drew closer, passing the locker. I could feel its presence right outside, the air heavy with the smell of rust and decay. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. And then, silence. I waited, counting the seconds, listening for any sound, but there was nothing. Slowly, cautiously, I opened the locker door a crack and peered out into the empty room. It was gone. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. I stepped out of the locker, looking around to make sure it wasn't lurking nearby. The warehouse was silent again. Without another second to waste, I raced down the stairs, not stopping until I reached the loading dock. This time, the door opened, and I burst outside, sucking in the cold night air.
I didn't look back as I sprinted to my truck, scrambled inside, and slammed the door shut, driving away from the warehouse and the terror it held, leaving it all behind. To this day, I don't know what I saw in that warehouse, but I will never forget those hollow eyes, the scrape of the chain, and the scream that still haunts my nights. My name is Mark, and I've been a long-haul trucker for over a decade. The rhythm of the road, the night drives, the hum of the engine, and the flashing lights of oncoming cars have become second nature to me. Yet some nights feel different, and I've learned to listen when the road whispers dark secrets. It was late October 2022, and I was hauling a load of frozen goods across the Midwest, destined for a warehouse on the outskirts of a small town. The night air was thick, heavy with an unsettling tension as I approached a solitary diner for my first stop. A sense of foreboding was churning in my stomach. The diner, illuminated by flickering neon signs, looked like a relic from another era. The moment I walked in, the smell of greasy fries and burnt coffee hit me like a wave. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of truckers hunched over their meals, an old man engrossed in his newspaper, and a couple huddled in the back, their heads bowed close, as if whispering conspiratorially. "I'll be right with you," said the waitress, a woman named Sarah, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I slid into a booth, trying to shake off the creeping discomfort that enveloped me like a shroud. While waiting for my burger, I couldn't help but overhear a conversation at the counter. "The road's dangerous tonight," said a large figure in a long coat, his voice deep and rough. I could only make out his silhouette against the harsh light of the diner. Sarah laughed nervously. "It's always dangerous out here, Charlie." "No, not like this," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "Something isn't right." His gaze briefly fell on me, and an involuntary shudder ran down my spine. Before I could ask what he meant, my food arrived. I forced myself to eat, but my appetite was gone. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was watching me. Charlie turned to leave, and as he passed my booth, he paused, fixing me with his gaze. "Watch yourself, driver," he warned, before disappearing into the night. I nodded, swallowing hard, my heart pounding. After finishing my meal, I paid Sarah, who looked worried. "Be careful out there, Mark," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded again, forcing a smile as I stepped outside into the biting cold. As I got into my truck, the shadows seemed to stretch longer, the darkness closing in on me. I took a deep breath and drove away from the diner, the tires crunching against the gravel. Hours later, I stopped at a gas station, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting eerie shadows over the asphalt. As I pumped gas, I noticed the old man from the diner pacing nervously inside the store. He glanced at me, his eyes wide. "Be careful, son. There are things out here that aren't right." "Yeah, I'll be fine," I replied, trying to dismiss his warning, but the unease was twisting in my gut. As I paid for the gas, I overheard the cashier, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, talking to another customer. "They say the highways are haunted. People go missing all the time." A shiver ran down my spine. I turned to leave, but the cashier added, "Don't let the shadows get you." I mumbled a quick thanks and got into my truck, my heart racing as I drove away. The shadows seemed bigger than ever, and every sound outside felt amplified, as if the darkness itself was alive. My next stop was a truck stop a few miles down the road. It was quiet, the flickering lights casting a haunted glow over the nearly empty parking lot. As I walked in, I ordered a coffee and sank into a booth, trying to shake off the feeling of dread clinging to me. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a blast of cold wind rushed in. A group of 5 people entered, laughing too loudly, their bright clothes standing out against the dreary interior. They seemed out of place, like a carnival stranded too far from home. "Look at this place," one of them said, grinning. "Perfect for a late-night horror flick." They settled into a booth opposite me, their laughter echoing loudly in the otherwise silent truck stop. I glanced at them furtively, the vibrant colors of their clothing contrasting with the gloomy atmosphere. They looked like they were playing a part in some sick joke. One of them, a woman with bright red hair and a mischievous smile, caught my eye. "Hey," she called out, leaning across the table. "You look like you could use some fun. Come join us." My stomach clenched with discomfort. "No thanks," I mumbled, turning away, but their laughter echoed in my head, a chilling reminder of how quickly things could descend into madness. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the diner into darkness for a brief moment. When they came back on, the group was gone, as if they had never been there. "What the hell?" I whispered, bewildered. The cashier looked equally shocked, her eyes wide. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Where did they go?" "I don't know, but they weren't real," she said, shaking her head. "They lure you in, and then—" I didn't want to hear any more. I bolted out of the truck stop, fear clawing at my insides. I climbed into my truck, my heart racing, desperate to leave the night behind. As I drove, the road stretched out before me, illuminated by my headlights. I stopped at a rest area to clear my head. The parking lot was eerily quiet, a haunted stillness hanging in the air. I got out and walked around, trying to shake off the weight of the night. Suddenly, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. I froze, straining to listen, but the rustling grew louder, and a figure stumbled into view. A young man, disheveled and wild-eyed, as if he had just run from something terrible. "Help me!" he cried, looking over his shoulder as if something was chasing him. "Hey, what happened?" I asked, stepping closer, concerned. "They're coming! You have to get out of here!" he shrieked, backing away from the bushes, panic etched on his face. "Who? What's going on?" He didn't answer, his eyes darting wildly around. "They're not real! They'll get you!" Before I could react, he turned and ran back into the darkness, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, the air feeling charged, and a sense of eyes watching me from the shadows. I rushed back to my truck, desperate to escape whatever darkness had followed me. As I climbed in, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see whatever had been chasing the young man lurking behind me. But there was nothing, just the stillness of the night and the oppressive weight of fear pressing down on me. I started the engine and drove off, but the feeling of being watched remained, wrapping around me like a noose. I finally arrived at the warehouse where I was to drop off my delivery. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a muted light over the parking lot. I parked the truck and stepped out, relieved to be at my destination. But as I walked toward the entrance door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me inside. The door creaked open as a man in a reflective vest greeted me, but his eyes held a flicker of fear. "Morning, you're just in time," he said, glancing at the truck. "Yeah, I had a weird night," I confessed, rubbing my eyes to shake off the exhaustion. He raised an eyebrow. "You all right? You look a little pale." "Just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. As I unloaded the truck, the weight of the night was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I felt a cold draft sweeping through the warehouse, and for a moment, the shadows seemed to deepen, a darkness closing in on me. Suddenly, I heard the whispering again, a faint, almost melodic sound. I turned around and saw a shadow dart across the wall, a figure flitting back and forth. My heart pounded as I tried to make it out, but it was gone before I could get a good look. "Hey, everything okay?" the man asked, noticing my sudden stillness. "Yeah," I lied, trying to shake off the unease. He shrugged, but cast a worried glance at the shadows. "You know, this place has a reputation. Some say it's haunted." I forced a laugh, but it felt hollow. "Yeah, I've heard." As I finished unloading, the coldness in the air intensified. The shadows deepened. I sensed a presence lingering, something dark and ancient, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Just then, I heard the whispering again, clearer this time. "Mark." It was soft, almost familiar, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The man looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, fear gathering in my stomach. "What is it?" I don't know," he stammered, backing away, "but we need to get out of here." Before we could flee, the shadows solidified, engulfing the light. I stumbled back, my heart racing as the whispers grew louder, surrounding me, my mind clamped in a vice. "Go away! Get away! Get away!" they screamed, a chorus of tormented souls lost in the darkness.
I ran for the exit, but the shadows twisted, blocking my path. "No! Let me out!" I screamed, panic seizing me. Just as I reached the door, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and I spun around to see a ghostly figure behind me, pale and hollow, its eyes sunken and empty. "You won't leave," it whispered, its voice like rusted metal. I ran back, terror coursing through me. I burst outside, gasping for air, the morning light feeling like salvation. I scrambled into my truck, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. As I started the engine, I took one last look in the rearview mirror. The warehouse loomed behind me, an ominous shadow. But just as I was about to drive away, I caught a glimpse of figures standing at the edge of the lot, watching, their hollow eyes seeming to bore into my soul. I floored the gas pedal, determined to leave the horror behind. But as the sun rose over the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, just waiting for the next opportunity to draw me back into its dark embrace.
I've been driving trucks for 15 years, cross-country. You'd think there wouldn't be a road, a highway, or a lonely truck stop I haven't seen. In my job, you get used to the strange hours, the empty stretches of highway, and the quiet solitude of night drives. Most nights are comforting, just me, my rig, and the miles stretching out under a sky full of stars. But on this night, something changed. It was around 11:30 p.m. I had just left Bismarck, North Dakota, driving east with a load of industrial goods that needed to be in Kansas City by the next afternoon. Not a heavy load, just a light freight, and the money was good enough to keep me on the road through the night. I've driven some long stretches, but this section of Route 90 was unusually deserted, even for a Monday night. I'd expected at least a few other trucks or maybe a stray car, but the road was dead. The first hour I drove in silence. The steady drone of the engine and the sound of the tires on the asphalt were my only companions. Then, sometime past midnight, I noticed a pair of headlights in my side mirrors. They were far back, almost like tiny pinpricks of light in the dark. Another trucker, maybe, or someone who just pulled onto the road behind me. I thought nothing of it. It's an open stretch, plenty of room for two. But as the miles went by, I noticed the lights weren't moving. They stayed the exact same distance behind me, neither getting closer nor falling back. They seemed to just hover there. I figured he might be matching my speed, maybe keeping his distance or saving himself the trouble of overtaking on the narrow highway. But after another hour, I couldn't shake the feeling that those lights were watching me, like two eyes that never blink. It was a strange thought, and I laughed it off, but the laugh felt forced. A while later, I took an exit onto a lonely stretch of Route 90, a side road I hadn't driven in a while, but which would cut down on my travel time. If that driver wanted to pass me, that would be his chance. I kept an eye on the mirrors as I took the turn, expecting the truck behind me to vanish, but it didn't. The two pale headlights swung onto the exit too, sticking to me like glue. "All right, buddy," I muttered, my fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. "What are you playing at?" To be sure, I took a series of sharp turns, trying to shake him off, driving through back roads I wouldn't normally take. But every bend, every twist, every maneuver, he followed. The discomfort was brewing into a strange, creeping fear. I reached for my CB radio, hoping to make contact, maybe find out if he had a mechanical problem or was looking for company on the road. Static crackled through the speaker, filling the cab with a familiar hiss. Then, over the static, a voice came through. It was barely a whisper, distorted and broken, but clear enough to make out the words, "Shouldn't run away." A cold shiver crawled down my spine. I hadn't said anything, hadn't even keyed the microphone. The voice seemed to come out of nowhere, low, overlaid with the radio interference. I tried to respond, to form words, but before I could get a word out, the voice cut through again, this time louder. "Don't try to hide it." A cold shiver crawled down my spine.
I hadn't said anything, hadn't even keyed the microphone. The voice seemed to come out of nowhere, low, overlaid with the radio interference. I tried to respond, to form words, but before I could get a word out, the voice cut through again, this time louder. "Don't try to hide it." I pulled the microphone back, glancing at my mirrors. The truck was still there, its headlights flickering on and off, as if barely surviving. Something was wrong with that truck. Its headlights weren't bright enough, and the whole cab looked strange, faded, as if it were half there and half somewhere else. I shook off the feeling and pressed the gas pedal down, determined to gain some distance. But the ghost truck kept up, moving as if it had no weight, gliding over the asphalt. And then I saw it up close. I couldn't make out much, but the color seemed black, almost matte, not shiny, but worn, like it had been driven through hell and back. There were no logos, no identifying marks, not even a license plate I could see. Just an empty cab, lurking in the darkness, drawing closer. My pulse raced, and I held my breath, hoping this nightmare would end soon. I fumbled with the CD player, hoping music would break the tension, but as I hit play, the static only grew louder, shriller. And then, as if on cue, the headlights behind me vanished. Relief flooded through me. Maybe the truck had finally given up or taken a side road. Regardless, I was thankful to be rid of it. But that relief was short-lived.
As I passed a shadowed stretch of road, the two faint lights reappeared, much closer than before. I could feel them, like two unblinking eyes boring into the back of my head. My heart hammered in my chest as the truck drew nearer, close enough now that I could almost see into the cab. But as I looked inside, I saw nothing but darkness. The driver was just a shadow, a silhouette that seemed to move, its form merging with the shadows. The radio crackled one last time, the voice whispering, "You shouldn't have driven away." The voice was hollow, empty, as if coming from another world. My heart raced as I pushed the pedal to the floor. The engine screamed as I sped down the highway, desperate to escape the phantom truck. But no matter how fast I drove, the ghost truck stayed behind me, gliding through the darkness, its headlights casting an eerie glow on the road. Finally, I saw a small glimmer of hope, a truck stop ahead, its neon lights casting a soft glow over the parking lot. I pulled in, parking at the edge of the lot, my hands shaking as I shut off the engine. I watched the mirrors, waiting, but the ghost truck didn't follow me in. It vanished into the night, leaving me alone in the eerie silence. I stumbled out of my truck, feeling the cold night air bite at my skin, and walked into the diner. Another trucker sat at the counter, an old man with a gray beard and weary eyes. I told him about the truck, hoping he might have an explanation, but he just looked at me, his face pale. "You saw him too?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Then he told me the story of a trucker who died on that road years ago, when his rig flipped over in a storm. They never found his body, just the burnt-out truck, empty, as if he had vanished without a trace. "Some folks say he's still out there," the old man said, searching for his final resting place, doomed to roam the roads forever. As I left the diner, his words weighed heavily on my mind. When I got back to my truck, I felt a strange presence, a cold emptiness that seemed to hang in the air. I started the engine and drove back onto the highway, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And then, just as I thought I was free, I saw them again, two faint lights flickering in my mirrors, closer than ever. The ghost truck was back, its headlights casting a spectral glow on the road as it followed me into the darkness. The radio crackled one last time, the voice whispering, "You can't escape." My name is Smith, and I've been a truck driver for 22 years. I've traversed countless highways and back roads, hauling everything from fresh produce to heavy machinery. It's a lonely life, filled with long stretches on the road, the hum of the engine, and the occasional diner or rest stop where I can catch a few hours of sleep. But despite the isolation, I find a certain peace in the rhythm of the road. My latest assignment took me deep into the heart of the Pacific Northwest, a sprawling forested region that often feels like it's from another era. The trees are ancient, gigantic towers that block out most of the sunlight, casting long shadows that dance eerily across the asphalt. This was the kind of place that inspired countless campfire stories, tales of the supernatural lurking just beyond the tree line. On this particular trip, I was on a tight schedule. I was tasked with delivering a load of materials to a remote logging operation deep within the woods. They needed the materials urgently, and I was the only driver available for the job. So I packed my gear into the cab, topped off the tank, and headed into the dense forests, determined to make the delivery on time. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The trees lined the road like sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out as if trying to grasp my truck and drag it into the depths of the forest. I dismissed the unease, attributing it to the late hour and the isolation. The road was empty, save for the occasional deer that darted across my path, and the only sound was the steady drone of my vehicle. After a few hours, the sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness enveloped the forest like a heavy blanket. I switched on my headlights, their beams cutting through the shadows. An eerie silence settled over the surroundings, broken only by the distant sounds of rustling leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The weight of the forest pressed down on me, and I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I was approaching the turnoff for the logging road when my GPS failed. The screen flickered before going completely black. Great, I thought, frustrated, tapping the screen. Just what I need. I rummaged for the old paper map I kept in the glove compartment. It was crumpled and worn, but it still had the route I needed. I pulled over to the side of the road to orient myself. As I unfolded the map, I noticed a strange coldness in the air, a biting chill that seeped into my bones. Just a draft, I told myself, trying to ignore the prickling feeling on the back of my neck. The woods were unnaturally still, and I had the unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone. After a few minutes, I found the right path and climbed back into the truck. As I drove onto the logging road, the gravel crunched beneath my tires, and the trees closed in around me. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were tracking me through the gloom. The road wound and twisted, deeper into the forest. The further I drove, the more claustrophobic the surroundings became. I was completely isolated, miles away from any civilization. My headlights illuminated the road ahead, but beyond that, the darkness seemed endless, swallowing everything in its path. About 30 minutes into the logging road, I finally spotted a glimmer of light in the distance. It was faint, but promising, a sign that I was nearing my destination. I drove on, my pulse calming at the thought of unloading the freight and getting back on the road. As I reached the clearing, my headlights illuminated the main building of the logging operation. It was a large, weathered building that looked like it had been out there for decades. A few trucks were parked around, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. I had made it. I parked my truck and climbed out, stretching my legs and taking in the surroundings. The air was thick with the smell of pine, and something else, something earthy and decayed. I dismissed it as a byproduct of the logging business. A figure emerged from the shadows of the building, a stocky man with a shaggy beard and a hard hat perched on his head. "You Smith?" he called out, his voice deep and raspy. "That's me," I replied, wiping my hands on my jeans as I walked toward him. "Got a delivery for you." He nodded, leading me to the back of the building where they had a loading dock. I backed my truck up to the dock, and we started unloading the materials.
"Thanks for getting here so fast," he said, lifting boxes off the truck. "We've been having some trouble with the weather and needed these materials quick." "No problem," I replied, trying to sound cheerful despite the oppressive atmosphere. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The forest felt alive, the trees whispering to each other in a language I didn't understand. Once the truck was empty, I wiped my brow and looked at the man. "All done. Do you mind if I take a quick break before heading back? It's been a long drive." "Sure, take your time," he said, his expression unreadable. "But be careful out there. The woods can be unpredictable. I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss the ominous words. I'll be fine. I stepped out of the building, breathing in the fresh air, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that clung to me. I walked around the clearing, taking in the massive trees and the sounds of the forest. There was something calming about it, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of isolation that plagued me. As I walked, I noticed a path leading into the woods, overgrown and barely visible. It piqued my curiosity, and against my better judgment, I decided to follow it. After all, what could go wrong? The path wound deeper into the woods, the undergrowth crunching beneath my feet. The trees loomed over me, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. Sunlight barely penetrated the canopy, and the air felt thick and heavy. As I walked, I began to hear a faint sound, like distant laughter, echoing through the trees. It sent a shiver down my spine. I paused, straining my ears, but the laughter faded into the silence, leaving only the rustling of leaves. "Get a grip, Smith," I muttered to myself. "It's just your imagination." I turned to go back, but something caught my attention, a flicker of movement deeper in the woods. I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to leave, but curiosity pulled me forward. I couldn't resist the urge to explore. I pushed through the undergrowth. The laughter grew louder. It was the laughter of children, innocent and carefree, but it felt wrong, out of place in the eerie silence of the forest. I followed the sound, my heart pounding, until I came to a small clearing. In the center was a circle of trees, their trunks blackened as if scorched by fire. And in the middle of the clearing was a group of children, their backs turned to me. They were dancing and twirling, their laughter echoing through the trees. But there was something strange about them. They wore tattered clothing, and their movements were jerky, almost unnatural. "Hey," I called out, stepping into the clearing. "What are you kids doing out here?" They stopped suddenly, turning to face me all at once. Their eyes were wide and unblinking, and their smiles were too wide, revealing teeth that were sharp and unnatural. I felt a wave of horror wash over me as I stumbled back, my heart hammering. "What the hell?" I muttered, instinctively reaching for my phone, but it was dead. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was completely cut off from the rest of the world. The children began to move toward me, their laughter morphing into a dissonant chorus that reverberated in the clearing. I turned to flee, panic rising in my throat, but as I sprinted back toward the road, I realized the path I had taken was gone. The trees closed in around me, branches twisting and intertwining, blocking my escape. "No, no," I cried, pushing through the undergrowth. But the forest seemed alive, moving and shifting, making it impossible to find my way back. I stumbled and fell to the ground as the laughter grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. I could feel them behind me, the children with their predatory grins, their laughter ringing in my ears. "Come to us, Smith," they sang, their voices ghostly and sing-song. "Play with us in the dark." I forced myself to stand up, adrenaline coursing through me as I ran in a random direction, desperate to escape. The trees seemed to loom over me, the shadows dancing in the fading light. I could hear their footsteps behind me, gaining on me, and I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning as I ran. Just as I thought I was about to be caught, I burst into another clearing. This one was larger, filled with the remnants of an old campsite. Abandoned tents were scattered everywhere, and in the center was a campfire, overgrown with weeds. I gasped for air, scanning the area for a way out, but as I turned around, I saw them, standing at the edge of the trees, their eyes glinting with malice. "Come back, Smith," one of them called out, stepping forward. "We just want to play." I felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "Get away from me," I yelled, grabbing a fallen branch from the ground. "I'm not playing your games." But the children just laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. They approached slowly, their movements almost fluid as they encircled me. "Don't you want to stay with us forever?" they taunted, their voices echoing in my head. I fought against the growing despair. I couldn't let them win. I turned and ran again, across the other side of the clearing, hoping to find an opening in the trees. As I ran, the laughter faded, and I felt a spark of hope. I fought my way through the undergrowth, stumbling and scraping myself, the sounds of the forest surrounding me, the wind whispering through the leaves, encouraging me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst through the trees and onto a familiar path. My heart leaped with relief as I recognized the way back to the logging operation. I raced down the road, fueled by pure terror. I burst into the clearing, gasping for breath. The man was still outside, and he looked at me with surprise as I sprinted toward him. "Smith, what happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I tried to explain, but the words tumbled out in a jumbled mess. "Kids, in the woods, they wanted me to play," I gasped, pointing back toward the forest. "We have to get out of here." He frowned, looking in the direction of the trees. "There's nothing out there, man, just the woods." But I shook my head, my heart pounding. "No, I saw them. We have to go, now." He took a step back, his expression shifting from concern to suspicion. "Are you sure you're all right? Maybe you should sit down." "No time," I shouted, panic flooding my veins. "Get in the truck, we have to go." Finally, he relented, running toward his own truck. I followed him, leaping into the passenger seat and slamming the door shut. As he started the engine, I glanced back at the trees. For a moment, I thought I saw them, watching me, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, a twisted grin spreading across their faces. "Drive!" I yelled, and he obeyed, spinning the wheel and flooring the gas. We sped down the logging road, the truck bouncing over the rough terrain as we left the clearing behind. I could still hear the laughter in my ears, a ghostly melody that would forever linger in the back of my mind. As we reached the main road, I let out a breath, realizing I had been holding it. We were safe, for now. But as I looked back into the forest, I knew the children were still there, waiting for their next victim, forever searching for those who were too foolish to venture too far into the heart of the woods.